The night was quiet in the valley, but inside Arvin's chest a storm refused to settle. He had spent months carrying the weight of failures that seemed to carve deeper into him with every passing day. People who once believed in him had stepped back. Some mocked him, some doubted him quietly, and some simply waited for him to break. Arvin didn't know which hurt more, their silence or their expectations that he would eventually surrender to the darkness pressing against him. He walked along the abandoned road, boots striking against cracked stone, each step echoing like a reminder of how far he had fallen. Everything he once thought was certain had slipped away. His strength, his confidence, his direction, even his own reflection felt foreign now, like a stranger wearing tired eyes and carrying invisible wounds. But he didn't stop walking. He didn't know why, but something in him refused to die. The world had taken almost everything, yet a thin thread inside him still burned with stubborn defiance. He held on to it like someone gripping a torch in a collapsing tunnel. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he wasn't done. Not yet. Arvin eventually reached an old stone archway, half ruined, half standing. His childhood mentor had once told him that broken things survived storms because they had already learned how to endure the fall. At the time he laughed. Now the words felt carved into his bones. He placed a hand on the cold stone and breathed out slowly. Behind him were memories of people who said he would never rise again. People who preferred him wounded because his strength once intimidated them. People who pretended to care only when it benefited them. He had given everything, and they took it as if he owed them his soul. When he finally broke, they stepped away like he was a burden they were relieved to drop. But they didn't know what breaking did to a man like Arvin. It sharpened him. The pain he carried didn't weaken him, it refined him. He just hadn't realized it yet. Arvin continued forward, entering the forgotten ruins ahead. The moonlight fell through fractured ceilings, illuminating dust that danced like spirits in the air. He stepped carefully, listening to the quiet. This place had been a training ground long ago, where warriors learned discipline, resilience, and silence. He remembered coming here as a boy, determined but inexperienced, dreaming of becoming someone the world respected. He smiled bitterly. That boy was gone, replaced by someone who had tasted loss deep enough to drown. But even drowning men sometimes find the strength to swim to the surface. He stopped in the center of the ruin and let the darkness surround him. Here, away from the voices of doubt, away from the eyes waiting for him to fail, he finally allowed himself to breathe without fear of judgment. He wasn't angry at the world anymore. Anger was loud, temporary, exhausting. What he felt now was quieter, heavier, and far more powerful clarity. He didn't need anyone to believe in him. He didn't need applause or support or validation. The fire inside him did not depend on anyone's permission. He sat on the cold stone floor, letting the night settle around him. The silence wasn't empty, it was fuel. The more he listened, the more he realized something he had forgotten for years. He still had fight left in him. Not the frantic kind that begs for someone to stay. Not the desperate kind that reaches for acceptance. This was a calm, steady strength that had survived betrayal, disappointment, and heartbreak. A strength that didn't need witnesses. Arvin closed his eyes. The world may have stripped him of almost everything, but it had failed to take the one thing that mattered most, his will to rise again. He breathed deeply, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the ground beneath him not as a place of defeat, but as the foundation of a return. He didn't know exactly when he would rise, or how, but he knew with absolute certainty that he would. And when he did, nothing would be the same. The morning sun crept over the mountains, melting the shadows that had guarded the ruins through the night. Arvin rose slowly, dust brushing from his clothes, but something about him felt different. His movements were quieter but firmer, his breathing steady, his eyes sharper. The exhaustion he carried was still there, but now it sat behind a renewed resolve rather than choking him. He stepped out of the ruins and into the golden light. The world hadn't changed overnight, but he had. The doubts of the past no longer weighed him down, they fueled him. Every scar felt like proof that he had survived what was meant to end him. Every betrayal felt like evidence that he had learned who he could no longer trust. And every disappointment reminded him that he still stood when others expected him to crumble. He took the road east, where a small town lay beyond the hills. It was a place filled with people who once whispered rumors about him when he fell. He used to fear facing them. Now he welcomed the walk, not because he wanted them to see him rise, but because their opinions no longer held the power to shape his path. Halfway down the trail, Arvin paused at a stream. The reflection staring back at him looked nothing like the broken man he once believed he had become. This reflection belonged to someone who had endured fire and walked through it stronger. Someone who had learned that solitude wasn't loneliness. It was a forge that tempered the spirit. He touched the water lightly, as if acknowledging the person he once was before letting him go. As he continued walking, memories of his past battles flashed through his mind, not to haunt him, but to remind him how far he had already come. He remembered the people who underestimated him, who believed he would never recover. They would be shocked to see him now, not because he was loud or triumphant, but because he carried a peace that couldn't be taken from him anymore. Peace was stronger than anger, stronger than revenge, stronger than fear. By the time he reached the town, the sun was high. People glanced at him as he passed, some with curiosity, some with quiet surprise. But Arvin didn't seek their reactions. He moved with the calm certainty of someone who had already walked through his darkest night and no longer needed to prove anything. He made his way toward the far edge of town, where a long road stretched beyond the hills, leading toward a distant horizon. He had no destination yet, and that no longer frightened him. The path ahead was uncertain, but uncertainty felt like opportunity now, not danger. Arvin stopped at the crossroads and looked back one last time. The town, the ruins, the memories, all of it formed the story of who he had been, but they no longer defined who he was becoming. He turned toward the open road, shoulders steady, breath calm, heart unburdened. For the first time in years, he felt free, not because he had escaped his past, but because he had outgrown it. He walked forward with a quiet strength, a silent promise echoing in each step. He wasn't rising for anyone else. He was rising for himself, and nothing in the world could stop that now.